welcome to the most excellent 80s movies podcast. It's the podcast where a filmmaker and a comedian punch the face of the camel, metaphorically, of the 80s movies we think we love or might have missed. And this is Conan the Barbarian, a movie selection from 1982.
Slave. Barbarian. Warrior. Thief. Conan.
They said you'd come. A man of great strength. Conqueror, one who could crush the snakes of the earth.
Purveyors of their own deaths.
He's evil, a sorcerer who can summon demons.
Day of doom is here. What daring, what arrogance! I salute you.
Out of an age undreamed of comes the most incredible adventurer of all. The man they call Conan the Barbarian. Coming to a theater near you from Universal Pictures.
Okay.
That one had a lot less dialogue, so it might have been tougher for our non-visual medium.
Yeah.
But
There's a lot of shirtless Arnold Schwarzenegger swinging a sword. But also like they really give away a lot of the big moments. You see Darth Vader turn into a snake. You see like all of the biggest moments of the movie. Like that's a real giveaway. Like you think of the movies or movie trailers giving away everything as a modern sensibility.
Right. Well, I feel like it was a desperate attempt of the studio. It's like, oh, we're worried that no one's gonna see this, and we just gotta show everything.
Make sure they know how many pectorals, how many biceps, how many sexy witches.
Yeah, because I mean, at this point, Arnold had done nothing.
Yeah. Well, and like the stuff that he had done, right? Like Masters of the Universe. I don't know what year that was, but he was dubbed. Is that not him?
No, that's Dolph Lundgren. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But they dub him too, right?
Oh, no. Yeah. You're thinking of Hercules.
I am thinking of Hercules. That's exactly what I'm thinking of.
Yeah. And the Terminator is still like 2 years out at this point, So Arnold Schwarzenegger is just like, some big buff dude that people know about. He's an oddity. He's not an actor.
Right. I have a question too. Is the guy who plays the king, is that Dumbledore?
No, that's Max von Sydow.
Okay.
He is not Dumbledore.
He's not Dumbledore? Okay.
No.
He seemed a little like Dumbledore to me. All right. Well, the person who is having all the answers and making all the corrections is, of course, Nathan Blackwell, filmmaker extraordinaire.
Well, hello there. And then with me, as always, is Krissy Lenz, improv comedy guru.
And mistake maker.
Mistake maker.
Yes. Mispronouncer of so many things.
Uh-huh. So I'm gonna head this one off at the pass to make the distinction. So the comedian and people in general are Conan. Mm-hmm. And then the character is Conan.
Conan. Okay. I got you. All right. Conan. There's so much that happens in this movie.
Oh, yeah. And for a script that must have been extremely short because there's so little dialogue, but in a great way. Like, there's huge sections just with no dialogue that it's basically like a silent film and an opera together with kind of a sword and sandal, beheading movie. It is the strangest mix, and if you're not, most people, I feel like most people out there probably the same preconceptions of anyone who hasn't seen the movie has a very base, low level conception of what Conan the Barbarian is, which basically is the Conan the Destroyer. Like, that it people's conception is what they have in that movie.
Yeah.
But Conan the Barbarian is a kick-ass movie made by just Oliver Stone and John Milius swinging for the fence and hitting it out of the park. It's an unexpected movie for those who haven't seen it.
They're swinging for the fence. They're hitting the fence. They're turning the fence into a snake. They're turning that snake into a bigger snake. And then that snake is eating the movie. And there's even another piece of it going on that is like, you have James Earl Jones in this movie whose performance is on another plane of existence from everybody else's.
Oh yeah, like I put it in the same category or even higher than Frank Langella in Masters of the Universe. Like he is just going for it. He is bringing home 11.
He is. And he's doing so much acting with just like with his eyes and his expression and his bangs. The bangs in this movie are their own thing. I don't understand what period of time this is where like every man had bangs, regardless of station or position in life or where they were from. It was just bangs, bangs, bangs. But so at the very top of this movie, we see like the little village. It's a little village, and like little baby Conan is there, like with his dad, and they're learning about the riddle of steel. And there's this very comical cut back and forth between like the quiet life in the village and these like scary men running toward the village. Who are those barbarians?
The scary men coming towards the village. Well, you could argue that barbarians are basically people without a quote civilization or society, and so you could call Conan's people barbarians, and then these guys coming in, are these raiders of an unknown origin. It turns out they've got the long form plan. They it turns out that they're later the big bad guys who have now over like a period of like 15-20 years have transformed into a cult. They've upgraded their criminal organization from just kind of like a
smash and grab
forest, gang to like a legitimate like religion / cult with tax exemptions.
Yeah, and I want to talk about who's sewing their robes. But like it reminded me of that scene in Quest for the Holy Grail where he comes running, like you just see it, like you cut between him running and it's like and he's running, and then there's like sort of peace and calm inside the village and he's like running, and then he comes in and just is killing people willy-nilly. Like this is that scene. Because like people in the village are just like, hold it, we're gonna make some soup, I'm gonna sew some buttons on something, and then it's like literally people are being murdered left, right, and sideways, and the entire place is being burned to the ground, and there's nothing left standing, except you find out later that they have, I guess, this was a kidnapping. They were kidnapping the children of this village to spin their wheel of questionable intent, questionable use.
The wheel of questionable intent. The wheel of pain.
And isn't it called the wheel of misery or something like
that?
No,
I think it's the wheel of pain. I could be wrong.
But what are they doing? Are they milling things?
That would be my guess because I feel like they're smart enough to have two functions. They're they've got the pain aspect, and then they've got the produce to continue their criminal organization.
Right.
Because
So
they've
they're
got
like,
big plans. They've obviously got like an accountant. They've
mhm,
got they've got like a council of businessmen. Like they've got like plans. Like they're
yeah.
not just like stumbling through this.
No, yeah. It's not for the love of beheading mothers and burning huts.
Yeah.
It's long term. And they achieve those goals. Like the James Earl Jones snake cult hits what they are aiming at. But there is this really like odd moment, interesting moment that I think is the third level of this film where like everybody is dead except presumably the 11 kids that they're going to nap. Conan himself and
Conan.
Conan's mama, Conan mama, who is standing there with a sword, and she's very fierce, she's very beautiful, but there's just this long standoff where she's standing there with a sword holding Conan's hand, and the bad guys all come up. There's this whole big ceremony of like, let's all take off our very fancy hats, let's wait for a really long time for James Earl Jones to slowly walk up and like, I guess, hypnotize her with his eyes. We just watch James Earl Jones's eyes tell the story to her of his 10-year plan. And at some point she's like, "Okay, I see the wisdom of your long-term goals," and just like he whops her head off, and Conan is just like, "Oh, it's not what I thought was going to happen," but and then the kids have been napped. They're spinning this wheel of industry, if you
Mhm.
will. And like over time, it turns out they only needed Conan. He's the only one spinning this wheel by the end.
Well, I think that's just a product of maybe it wasn't the most, perhaps there was misguidance in the whole process of these kids. Like, did they really need them? Were they really grooming them for anything? I feel like they were really just using them as potential labor. Like they could, eventually you assume that they're dying off, but maybe they're actually like taking them from scratch and then putting them into their army. But for
Yeah.
whatever reason, Conan is the last remaining one, and it's just a fantastic backstory for someone who's for this character who
Hmm.
is ultimately on a path of like becoming a hero, on a path of revenge, like these epic tales. This whole movie is like an opera, it is operatic at least,
Hmm.
because really like operas are not this visual,
Right.
like the story of of his mother dying, the town getting sacked, him being put on the wheel of pain, him growing up and becoming a man, and then him afterwards being sold into kind of like pit fighting. There's
Hmm.
almost no dialogue during all of that.
Right. Well, there's like the narration, which we learn much, 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 much later in the movie, is the wizard guy that we meet
Hmm.
very briefly,
Yeah,
who's just like,
the chronicler of his legend.
who's like, I guess I should tell you what's going on. Yeah, so the like sort of ginger teen who is like whipping him on the punishment wheel in the first half, at some point when they are adultish, is like, you know what, now is our time. They have their long-term goals, but I have my 5-year plan, and it is to break you out of here and for us to go to a different form of imprisonment for you, which is pit fighting. And like, Conan just asks no questions. He's like, "Okay, I go with you now. I fight this guy. He's biting my neck. Should I just kill him? I will kill him. Oh, I killed him, and now I get fancy murder bracelets. I killed all those other guys. I get a fancy murder hat. Um, kill 3 guys and I get a girlfriend for the day. And he just like asks no questions. He just sits crisscross applesauce and waits for the next task to be given him. So I guess like he has a very zen approach.
Well, he's captive at this point. Like he is still the child of the mind of a child, and so he is. I feel like depicted very realistically, and compellingly that he is still finding his adulthood in the first half hour, and so eventually,
and good God, it's only been a half hour.
uh-huh. Yeah, and there's so much that's happened. Yeah, and so eventually, the red-haired man, it's like that feeling. It's like, no, I love you, so I must let you go. Like he's drunken and crying and breaks his chains. Go, you fool, live.
It's a real Harry and the Hendersons moment.
Yeah, and again, and it's told all this whole story has huge sections where it's just told with very little dialogue and all with visuals, and then just the amazing music by Basil Polidorus. I hope I'm not butchering his name. But yeah, it's also one of the great like soundtracks, like one of the great movie soundtracks.
Yeah, I mean, it's very epic. It's very intense. It is very entertaining. Like, so then he runs away and he like stumbles into like he's running for his life
Mm-hmm.
and he like stumbles into a cave. And one question I have about this movie and many other movies like it where there's this trope of like skeletons being in cool places. Like they're sitting on a throne, they're wearing their crown, they've got their sword. Like, did they die and then they were placed there? Or were they like, I feel a little scratch in my throat, I'm going to sit in the spot where
Uh-huh.
I would like to be discovered as a
Well,
skeleton one day?
yeah, it's kind of like the Goonies issue of like everyone sitting around the table. I feel like they were poisoned and then
Yeah.
put in place,
Uh-huh.
you know?
There's a lot of moments in this too where you're like, how did those skeletons get there? Why didn't anyone ever move them? Like, why are there corpses
Uh-huh.
everywhere? But he finds like a cool sword and he finds this, so then he's just like running around. He like has some sexy times with a cave witch.
I like the idea that basically this like super aggressive, crazy, like witch. That this is actually his retelling of the story, of an aggressive female,
Yeah.
and him telling the chronicler of what he thought,
What's
and it's
happening?
just it's blown out of proportion.
And like, was this is like they talk about Game of Thrones as the like sex position or whatever, where it's like they're telling you things you need to know about people and places, but there's like major hardcore like sex happening right in front of your face. So it's like, and so she tells him about the 2 snakes, right? And the moon.
Yes, so he's still haunted by the symbol of the bad guys that destroyed his village, which is like the 2 snakes meeting together, and so he still desires revenge for his
Yeah.
family.
And like she gives him all this information, but then she like turns into a monster and also tries to eat him and then becomes lightning and like runs away. And it's pretty
Mm-hmm.
great. Very memorable.
Nothing went according to
No.
plan, except
um but he does get to meet his best friend, who I guess was like being put out as food for her pet wolves,
Subutai.
Subutai. And like they have just the best relationship. Like I love them. I love them from the moment of them like breaking out together and eating together and being like, what is your god? Oh, my god is wind. Cool. My god
Mm-hmm.
is a guy named Crom. And then they're like,
Uh-huh. And he laughs at your god. Your god
mm-hmm.
stinks, and my god like lives above your god.
And then Subutai is like, I don't know. I mean, my god is kind of everywhere. And Arnold
Uh-huh.
Schwarzenegger's like, damn.
And he just like, and then he just like
You got
glares
me
at him.
there. Yep. And then they do this like the fun run. Like that's how they get from place to place is they just run and it feels joyous, right? It feels like they're just like, wee,
Uh-huh.
yay.
We really wish we had
But we're
horses.
having so much fun. Yay. It's the Conan
Uh-huh.
and Sqwishy fun run 5K. They meet Valeria. She's amazing. They climb a tower.
Mm-hmm. Well, they have this great D&D adventure to where they they get to a town, they there's like tavern people and various like shops, and they look around for a quest and they find this tower and they decide, oh, we're going to break into it, and then they meet another like member of the party. Oh, I guess we should team up together. Oh, you silly people, you didn't even bring rope. All right, let's work
Mm-hmm.
together. And then they break in, and then there's a monster and there's a jewel and there's cultists, and it's it's so great,
It is very
like
much
this is,
D&D though, yeah.
yeah. But I really like there's so many different types of world building and fantasy worlds. This is a very interesting, um it's like a lot of like typical fantasy realms. It's always a lot of European fantasy origins of like, so you ultimately are like a bunch of white people, and elves, and then you've got the dwarves, and it's hard to introduce other ethnic backgrounds. And with this one, it's really kind of like it takes place wherever like their version of Mongolia intersects with kind of like almost like a slightly Viking Eastern European section. So you always have those kind of like ethnicities and different interesting backgrounds in
Mhm.
there, and it feels totally real, and it's much more diverse than I think a lot of other movie fantasy
Yeah.
worlds.
And you can see recognizable pieces of like that looks Mongolian, that does look Viking, that's clearly Asian, um
Hmm.
and then they just like are for either 3 days or 3 years like living high on the D&D horse where they're just like rich in jewels and like getting high and Valeria and Conan fall in love um and they're just like living their best lives.
Hmm. This is also the age of like feathered hair and like heavy metal haircuts. You know,
And so many bangs.
yeah, it's like, and then you can see all this stuff like in early D&D stuff. Like everyone had these types of haircuts. You know, like
Yeah.
very 80s heavy metal long hair style haircuts.
Yeah. And it is like it is the haircut you picture on that like the thing where he like he's got his muscles all out and he's standing on a hill holding up his sword and she's like down like holding his leg
Uh,
and it's like
mm,
that is the vibe. That's what they're
yeah.
going for. And like the love between Valeria and Conan is intense and it's both like expressed verbally by her but also very not verbally by the story that we're seeing unfold. So, a king who is not
Mm,
Dumbledore, let's be clear about
that's right.
that, is he's like, they took my daughter, the snake cult took my daughter. I want her back. I'll give you, like, literally carry away as many jewels as you can hold in your hands. They mean nothing to me. Bring me back my daughter.
Hmm.
But like no real timeline, no like parameters, just, when you get to it. And Valeria and Subutai seem to be like, yeah, let's not. He already gave us all these handfuls of jewels. Let's not go mess around with.
Hmm.
At this point, he's learned it's Thulsa Doom. Is that
Yeah,
right?
it's the one name you pronounced correctly.
I feel like I was
I'm
born to say Thulsa Doom.
joking.
like, so they're like, let's not, like, he's a demon, he's got all these powers, let's just keep doing our thing.
Yeah, because they're at this point their occupation is thieves. You know, they're not noble heroes. They're like, let's break in and steal stuff because we have nothing. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to touch back again, just like how good the storytelling is. The courtship between Conan and Valeria. You know, we get to see we feel it, but it's in such of a short duration that they go from acquaintances to like soul bonded. And it's done so well because we get to see this arc. You know, we see their courtship and a little bit of flirtation as they're like looking through the jewels, you know, and it's done really nice. It's done really well, and then we basically see them like decide to go for full sexy time.
Which, like, I think their sexy time lasts like a couple weeks, or like they do take food breaks.
Right, and then you see them having fun and with the eating, so it's not just about the passion, it's about, like, their relationship, like, blossoming, you know, and then you see, like, the soul bonding of them just holding each other, and from the beginning I timed it for the beginning of, like, their flirtation where they're, you know, they're just, like, testing the waters to where they're now embracing, you know, as soul bonded, and they're now like at a bar together. Oh, you trying on different hats and stuff like that. That's 3 minutes.
Oh wow.
That's all that happens in just 3 minutes, you know, and it's amazing. It's fantastic storytelling.
But she does verbalize too. Like at some point, she says like, way towards the end where she is dying, she's like, let me breathe my last breath into your mouth. It's like, wow,
Ooh.
that is intense. But even before Conan leaves her, she's like, we're gonna be together forever. That's literally the only thing that matters to me. And then he's like, well, I guess I can't figure out how to like tell her that I gotta go do this thing, so I'm
Yeah.
just gonna go.
Yeah, there's that great moment where she's like, let's just take the money we've got and ride off and go on other adventures. There's no reason to go after this. It's too dangerous. And
Yeah.
then like he embraces her, but then as he's holding her, he then picks up the emblem of the snakes and looks at it again as she's holding him, just immediately letting us know that, you know, what his intent is. And definitely, you know, we credit the filmmakers with all this visual storytelling, but also there was a very pragmatic sense of stripping out a lot of dialogue, is because Arnold has this super thick Austrian accent, you know, and it's thicker at this point than in anything he's ever done. He had to take a lot of like speech classes and things like that, but they, you know, they just found that like he was originally the narrator doing the exposition, and the, you know, it's like the studio is like, we can't
It's not working.
yeah.
I like that. Yeah, and because he really doesn't have a lot of words. And it is so distinct of that like Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonation that was like so everywhere in the like the 80s and 90s, where he's just like rah, rah, rah. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in this. This is a real show me don't tell me movie. But so he runs away. He meets the guy who becomes the narrator, the giggle witch, who like lives in the
played by
place
Mako. Yeah,
where like fire doesn't burn, and
yeah, it's a super windy hill that, you know, surrounded by like a graveyard.
and some kind of like
got,
ghosts or something.
That's right.
But anyway, he finds this temple, and it's like, my question is, okay, this is a snake cult, but it also seems like really hippie-ish, like they're like
That's the
flowers
hook, yeah.
and dandelions, and it's like it's about what is it about? Like, what is luring them?
Well, yeah, that's the interesting thing is that it's not like they're, conquering people and putting them under the lash. Like they are enticing, probably like well-to-do, white women
Mm-hmm.
who in their, if they were in modern day, they would seek out yoga and Zumba instead,
Yeah.
and you see like when they're in the cult, when they're stealing the jewel, in the tower, it's all these young women
Mm-hmm.
who are in this cult,
Yep.
who have left their homes seeking meaning. And so that's the hook, is that's the that Thulsa Doom is giving them, is basically a new religion. He's
Mm-hmm.
giving them a new meaning. And it's probably based off of of some of the hippie generation, because everyone looks like hippies with the flowers and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of like that movement. And I can totally see, just knowing John Milius, like John Milius, the director and co-writer with Oliver Stone. John Milius, I could totally see just having this really like low version of hippies. So John Milius, he's friends with friends with the Coen brothers. The character Walter in The Big Lebowski is based off of John Milius.
Oh, wow. Oh
So
my. Okay.
we've seen another John Milius film, which was Red Dawn.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So just a love of like military history and strategy and tactics, but also strangely like a huge surfer.
Oh.
Like one of I think his first movie was a surfing movie. And so the actor Subutai, who plays Subutai, is not an actor, he is a surfer.
Ah. He fits in perfectly in this film.
Uh-huh.
Um and so yeah, so there's these hippies, they're all like waiting their turn to walk up the mountain. We have to assume that at least a third of them are going to go into the robe making portion of this infrastructure. There
Mhm.
is clearly infrastructure. They've got a whole system mapped out. And Arnold Schwarzenegger does a very clever job of like, showing his little symbol like it's an ID, being like, no, I've got a backstage pass. I've got a backstage
Mhm.
pass. I
Mhm.
need to get backstage. And then he does, but he gets busted. And
Yeah.
James Earl Jones is like, okay, what is happening right now? You're not one of my little princesses. And he's like, well, you killed my father and like destroyed my whole village. And my favorite moment of this entire movie is when James Earl Jones is like, yeah, I was like that. I was like that when I was younger. You got me. You got
Uh-huh.
me. I did. That was me. I'm not gonna. I was a very murdery in my youth. Um, and then he does this whole thing. Is like, the riddle of steel. Like, here's the answer. Steel is only as strong as the hand that wields it. And I don't need steel. I can ask a pretty girl to jump off a cliff, and she will jump off a cliff. So
Mhm. Yeah,
let's
flesh
not.
is
Yeah,
stronger.
that's great. Like, all of a sudden
Mhm.
you're like, wow, damn, like that's deep. He is acting the hell out of it. Like, he is so believable. I was like, great, how do I sign up for this cult? It definitely seems
Mhm.
like better than anything else that's going on. um and so he has Conan crucified
Uh-huh. Crucify him.
to the tree
Uh,
of woe.
whoa.
Whoa. um and like he gets crucified, and he is out there. He bites the head off a vulture. um
So hardcore.
so hardcore. And
Just so many things.
so many things. He punches a camel, he bites the head off a vulture. Like, but it's like he's not giving up, even though he is like crucified to the tree of woe. If you try and bite his pepperonis, he's gonna bite your head off vulture, so just back off.
Mhm.
So Valerian sabotage
Subutai.
Subaru come and rescue him, but like he did. So they take him to the Giggle Wizard, and they like tie him up in the windy field and say, like, you know, they do this spell to be like, well, either he'll come back
Mhm.
or he'll be taken. And they mean that literally, because animated ghosts come and try and like take him, and Valeria's like, nope, and she sits on his body so that they can't
slapping
get
the
it.
ghosts off.
Yep. And like, that's love, man. And she's like, whatever the cost is, I'll pay it. Very like Game of Thrones, you know,
Mhm.
moment. Whatever the cost is, I'll pay it. And then he just wakes up and he's like, whoa. Oh man,
I gotta use the bathroom.
it's been a week. It has been a week. So then they go assault the tower again.
No. So yeah. Well,
Wait, yeah.
there's the tower at the beginning, and there's kind of like the main fortress home base that Conan went after, that they now begin to assault. And then this is where you see like John Milius's like love of tactics. Like they're putting on like camouflage war paint, and they're going into super like stealth ninja mode. You know, they're sneaking through the whole layer, and we see them basically like assess and plan their attack and then launch their attack, as we also get like a backstage look at what this cult is doing, and like they are full on like cannibals and having an orgy, and yeah, just, and then, you know, doing their snaky business.
Yeah, and so they get the princess. They get out of there.
Yeah, after and just an epic fight scene.
Yeah, and where there's like a big like there's like the orgy that's happening, and then there's a cauldron full of like Soylent Green and like hands. And they get the princess, but she doesn't want to go. She's like, "Give me back to my sexy snake daddy." We do see him transform like into a snake. Which is very practical effects. It's like a puppet face that's being like pumped full of air, and then all of a sudden you blink and it's a snake face. But then she's like, "Give me back to my snake daddy. I hate you. I love him." And James Earl Jones kills Valeria with a snake arrow.
Which is so effing creepy.
Yeah, he takes a snake like out of his pocket. He just pulls it like straight and shoots it in a bow into Valeria. And she dies.
Yeah.
She's my favorite person in this movie.
Yeah, and then make it. When she dies, she basically mentions that this was the bargain that she made to get Conan back.
Yeah, and I'm like, you know, that's meaning, like, that's love, man. She loved him. She really, really loved him. Let me breathe my last breath into your mouth. Like, wow. Wow. Okay. So but they're still like, what do we do now, right? So they go back to the Windy City, and now it's tactics again.
They've got the princess. Yeah, they've got the princess, and they decide, like, I would take the princess and run, but instead they take a day to basically create defenses,
and they use their skeletons again, like
yeah, this is again like the military tactics of creating like fortifications and traps and, you know, fallback points with weapons and like arrows in the sand, you know.
Yeah.
Because they don't just want to run, they want blood. Like they want, you know, Conan wants revenge.
Yeah, and like he deserves it. That like poor guy's been through quite a bit at this point. Like,
and then possibly one of my favorite, if not my favorite moment, is when Conan prays to his god Crom.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically is saying, I've never prayed to you before. I don't have the tongue for it, but grant me revenge. Just know that we were like, few against many,
Mm-hmm.
but grant me revenge. And if you're not listening, then to hell with you.
Yeah.
I love that he just like, if you're not going to help me, then fuck off.
Yeah. But also, if you are listening, though, please help me. Like,
Right.
I'm doing my best down here.
In summary.
Yeah. And they show up. They have this sort of like big battle. At the end of the battle, they still have not got James Earl Jones. Like, he's doing that thing where he's like, I'm going to be away over here. You guys go fight over there.
Mm-hmm. Delegation.
Yeah, he has that moment of like, well, if I can't have her, no one can. He tries to snake arrow the princess, who is calling out to him like, Snake Daddy, I love you. Save me. I want to be with you. Like, I didn't ask for this. And then he shoots at her with the snake arrow, and she's like, wait a damn minute. You're going to shoot me with this? I thought we had a thing. And then she's like off it. Or she still wants to be with him a little at that point. I don't remember.
It's hard to do a 180.
Yeah. But they still have not killed James Earl Jones.
Yeah.
He has to still go kill James Earl Jones. And he does. Like, he just goes to the top of the steps.
Mm-hmm. He's giving a big presentation, like the big summer solstice event,
and Conan,
surrounded by thousands of followers.
And Conan is just like, whoopsie doopsie, there goes your head. Like, gotcha. He like throws the head down the stairs, and all of the followers are like, well, I guess that's that. Like, I was still into it when he was a snake, but I don't know, if he doesn't have a head, I guess I'll go home.
And I love how after the deed is done, Conan sits down and absorbs the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he sits on the steps and thinks about it.
Mm-hmm.
Thinks about what happened as people are leaving,
And then, like, so we get the little button at the end, which is like, this was just one of many adventures. Like, Conan went on to have like this whole full life, and he became a king, and like all of this stuff. And what he says that they brought the princess back, and then the king, who's not Dumbledore, was like, "Cool, you're the king now."
Mm-hmm.
Right?
No.
Okay.
No, he ends up getting his own like kingdom later on in other stories.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's Conan the Barbarian. Like, it's a lot. And we saw this movie together years and years and years ago at Film Bar at a really wonderful screening that they did, where they had like a camel piñata that you could go punch if you wanted to, and like they gave us like inflatable swords and stuff. That was a good time. I loved Film Bar. I will miss it dearly. So like, on a scale of 1, like, I guess we have to say like decapitated head, because they are all over the place in this movie.
Right.
1 head to 10 heads. How many heads would you cut off?
Well, so I was, you worry about these movies holding up, ones that like, it's like, oh my God, that was so great. Like, I didn't see this as a kid, maybe as a teenager or in my 20s.
It's not for kids.
Yeah, no, it's not for kids. It's not a kid movie. But I don't know. Like, this viewing was so strong.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to give it like an upper tier, like 9.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, like it doesn't have that like pitfall of not holding up in terms of like, oh, these are the ideas of the 80s that no longer have a place in our 2022 society. It totally dodges that bullet by being, this period piece and not having to deal with that. So So does it hold up? And I would even say, like, does it hold up in terms of, like, if you held this up against another Sword and Sandals epic hero's quest adventure, you know, yeah, I think it holds up. Like, you look at the effects and be like, oh yeah, that's very, you know, 1982 effects, and it is, but it does not take away from your enjoyment of the movie or of the effects themselves. Like, seeing how the sausage is made doesn't make it less delicious. um so it's a fun watch, and what a great experience to, like, watch with friends, like at a party, you know, have that themed, like, film bar experience, have a signature drink, give everybody inflatable swords, let's punch a camel, like, we're gonna have a great time. And if you haven't seen this movie and you're being shown it for the first time, which was the experience that I had when we went to Film Bar, I'd never seen it, was just like, it's like, what is happening? And, you know, that's what I always look for, is that fun to be like, oh, we're going to have a Conan party and we're going to watch Conan and you're going to love it. And then we're going to go watch Red Sonja and it's going to be this whole thing. So I would give it slightly less. I would give it an 8. But I still think it's very good.
Oh yeah,
very good.
It completely holds up.
Yeah, it's a fun time. And so, like, I really struggled with a deep cut recommendation. Do you have one?
I do. It was just watching this, it just got me in the mood to flip through old D&D books.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
like the classic, like, based, like the red box set from like 1983. So like when I was younger, my dad bought a bunch of like these D&D books, but my brothers never wanted to play, and I didn't have like friends to play role-playing games with who were like into it. So it was basically me just reading through them, like absorbing like the stories of the world building and the things like that, and just like looking through, it's like, oh, this is how much a sword costs. This is how much like a water skin or a wine skin costs. If you're into Conan, flipping through some of these old like Dungeons and Dragon books is, to me, is connective tissue of the experience, you know. And all the illustrations, they've got the same sort of haircuts and concepts of what like fantasy fashion is like.
Yeah, it's that whole hold on to the leg vibe. Yeah, I mean, I think that even playing D&D would be a great recommendation, because it is very much like the experience of, like, you're in a town. Who do you talk to? Who do you punch? This guy's offering you drugs. Like, you're going to take the drugs? Like, here comes this lady who wants you to climb the tower. We climb in the tower. Like, it's pretty great. Yeah, and I just couldn't come up with anything that was analogous to a Conan like experience. So I'm just like giving a deep cut recommendation of something that people may not know about that I think is great, which is an animated series called Over the Garden Wall. And I think it's on Amazon Prime, or it's definitely streaming free somewhere. And it's like you can watch it all 10 episodes in like one afternoon. It's really great and charming. Elijah Wood is the voice of one of the characters, and my 16-year-old daughter showed it to me and was like, "You're gonna like this," and I was like, "Well, I don't think I'm gonna like this, but all right." And I loved it. And so it needs to be the new Adventure Time, because I need so much more of it. So Over the Garden Wall.
Well, let me add on to that, and then I just totally remembered this. This is very, very Conan, but Genndy Tartakovsky's Primal, which is on Adult Swim. I think you can watch it on HBO Max. But it's basically like, you know, very little dialogue. It's basically the running adventures of a caveman / Conan type character and his buddy / pet T-Rex, you know, as they go through various exceptionally violent but stirring adventures.
Ooh. And have you, Nathan, seen Vox Machina, the Critical Role animated series?
No, I haven't.
That would be a good deep cut recommendation. In fact, let's make that my deep cut recommendation, because it's a D&D campaign that has now been animated.
Interesting. Okay.
So it's not that similar to Conan, but it is very good. Vox Machina.
Okay.
That is definitely on Amazon. So where can people find you, Nathan? Can they support the movie? Can you tell us a little bit about the movie?
Yeah, so I'm still in production. We were going to shoot in January, but we had to pause because of Omicron. We're actually we had to pause, and we are resuming shooting in 1 week. So my brain is basically exploding with anxiety. But we're once we're done with this leg of shooting, we're going to be about 90% in the can, and so we'll just have 2 days to pick up later. It's tough because our main actors have to fly in, but
Yeah.
it's just the difficulty of schedules, and we don't have the money to kind of like own people's schedules, you know. The dramedy, the last movie ever made, you can find on the Facebooks, and you can find on the Instagrams, or the easy shortcut is just go to Sqwishy Studios.
Yeah. And the main actor is Adam Reaney, who has been our frequent guest and will be our future frequent guest. And you'll see Craig Michael Curtis in there, and like a lot of most excellent 80s friends and family. I'm super excited to see the final version. And I guess to participate a little bit in the coming days. You can find me in my physical presence if you are in the greater Phoenix area at the Neighborhood Comedy Theater in downtown Mesa, Arizona. And I will give a new pod recommendation. So I've been recording. I've been on a few episodes of the Saturday Matinee podcast over at True Story FM, where our friends Andy Nelson and Matthew Fox and Kyle Olson and a lot of the people we have had as guests here have their podcasts. And so I've been I guess like a semi-permanent host on some of those pods, and it's really fun. So listen to the Saturday Matinee podcast in the True Story FM next reel thread. And we're gonna get Nathan on there as soon as he's done like being very stressed out. Yeah. But filmmakers gotta film make, so you do your thing.
Okay. Be right back.
Okay. Thanks so much for listening. Please, I beg of you, do the things. Like the things. Like tell me what you think of how I've said Conan this whole time. And criticize me, but give me 5 stars and we'll call it square. Like and review, tell a friend. We so appreciate you. And as always, when you're out there in your world, punching your way through the camels of life, remember to be excellent to each other and party on, dudes. And I think you got to do like a rawr, rawr, like you did it so good.
Okay.
Yay.
Awesome.